All right. Here we are, Friday again. So excited for this time of the week. Let me bring in my partners in crime here. All right. I'm going to bring Aiden on. What's up?
Hey Ken, how you doing?
Doing all right. Happy Friday. Uh,
You too.
let's get Mike in here.
Hey,
Yo,
hey, how you doing?
we made it again.
We made it. It's
We all,
another week.
all survived and made it out the other end here. So pretty excited.
That's right. Very happy, very happy.
So I think we have a guest today. Who we have joining us?
So today we got Stephen Mizell, and we're super lucky to have him. Stephen has been building APIs for a long time, has also been both a developer and a product manager at API tooling companies. So he was at Apiary and SmartBear. And today he's consulting, helping people build great APIs, has a lot of cool experiences to share with us, and has also been working with Optic and Superface on their next-gen API tools. So much he can share with us today, and we're really lucky to have him.
Very cool. Let me bring him on. Here we go. Let's see, and there we are.
There he is.
Hey, Stephen.
Hey, how's it going?
Welcome.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So what? I mean, God, I'm trying to think when we first met. You're another one of those people that's just kind of always off in the background. I think Twitter first, but RestFest, API Strat, all the usual
Yeah,
hangings out.
that was our first time in person, I think, was at API Strat and then the road
Yeah.
trip to RestFest from there.
Oh yeah, the road trip to RestFest. Yes, I remember. So yeah, I did not. I had a flight, but then I opted to drive with you to RestFest, and that was my first RestFest because I had missed previous ones because of various life things. So, anyways,
I
welcome.
love
Thank
this
you.
idea of the API tour bus going from conference to conference.
I like that idea. Actually, I like that more than you can know.
It's a pretty drive.
So Stephen, we were talking on the phone the other day. You mentioned the first API you ever built. I want to tell us a little bit about that today.
Yes. So I had a really fun experience as my first API. I was working at a scoreboard factory, which was a couple years out of college, and I was hired as a business systems analyst. And really, my job was to go and look at all these old systems they had, which they had never moved to new systems when they got a new system. They had always kind of kept the other one around. So everyone had two monitors to use the new system and the old system to find people and the data they needed. And so this was a huge problem. You know, people were moving data from one system to another by hand or typing it in. So this was the first challenge was, can we reduce a lot of errors? Can we fix some of the issues as we go out to the production floor, make the data kind of go along with the scoreboards? And so as I got to reading and studying it, API was the first thing that like really popped up is like, okay, we can build some APIs. We'll use the API over here, and then we'll use the API on these other systems and hook everything up together. And then the first kind of area was the salespeople would take some data and they would copy and paste it into one system, and then they would copy and paste it into an Excel spreadsheet, and then someone else would have to type it into these scoreboards. And so as we said, you know, can we go from sales to the scoreboard without anyone touching it? And so we said, okay, we'll build an API, and we had developers, contractors at the time that were building the software on the scoreboards. And these were embedded systems guys, and they built some desktop apps for us. And I said, hey, I'm going to build an API. All you have to do is grab the data, pull it, and then put it onto the scoreboards. And they're like, what's an API? And I'm like, you know, I'll put some JSON together for you in the API, and you call the API with HTTP and grab the data and manipulate it as you need. I've never used JSON. What's that? And so we hit this wall, and you know, I'm asking them like, what are you used to? What have you done before? You know, they've never done anything over the web. They'd only worked with XML. And so I got to doing some more research and reading, and actually came across a few interesting things. One was Mike's book. I don't know if we talked about this before, Mike, but it was your building hypermedia APIs with HTML5 and Node.
Yeah.
And then I came across John Moore's video about how they built an HTML API. And so I came back to him and I said, hey, I'm going to build just an HTML API that you can use. Just use your browser, go look at it, grab stuff from the server as HTML, just follow the names and the link relations in there, and use the forms to update things as you need. And they said, okay, we understand this. This makes sense. And they go away for 3 weeks, 4 weeks. They come back and everything works. Like they were able to hook it all together. So it was one of the first experiences for me. I mean, first APIs, of course, but few experiences where I didn't really write any documentation. I didn't know any better. And I just built this HTML API and they disappear and they come back and it all works. So that was like the first interaction I had with APIs. And it was kind of just such a fun experience, like for things to work right off the bat. It hasn't happened since. I've never had anything work first time since.
Yes. It was all a conspiracy to draw you in.
Yes.
It's never the same after that.
Yes.
I remember, I don't remember talking to you about the book, but I remember in like 2012 or something, I just actually called you on the phone, right? Isn't that what happened?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was at the same place.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I remember because the scoreboard thing I remember hit me. I called you. I can't remember. You were working on something. It had to do with either ResFest or one of the formats. I don't know what it was. It was something that somebody said, boy, you should talk to this guy, Stephen. And I said, sure, I'll do that. And I remember calling you. I happened to be in New York City at the time. It was Computer Associates. It was at CA. I was at CA offices doing some work. And I said, well, I've got some time. I'll call this guy. And I couldn't believe I was calling back when I asked you. I said, wait a minute, you're in Kentucky? Oh, okay. All right. Wait, you're working on scoreboards? You know, there were all these sort of like surprising connections. And I hadn't heard all the details about this particular API, but I do remember what struck me about the conversation was how I want to say just how creative you seem to be thinking. Like this example where you just said, well, I'm having a hard time talking to these people about JSON and about APIs, and you just said, well, I'll just give you HTML. Like what was the thing that caused you to say, well, rather than try to explain this, let me switch gears and just say HTML? Like what is that just typical for you, or was there something that flipped?
Maybe a little bit of typical, maybe part of it laziness, like not wanting to have to spend a lot of time, explaining and going through things. But I do kind of remember that feeling of, wow, I'm going to have to first kind of build something new for me and then explain and teach it to these guys new for them. It's going to be a really challenging experience to do that. Can I kind of work around that issue rather than kind of put myself in that? Because we wanted to get it done kind of quickly.
Yeah. Let me just ask, did you know that they worked with HTML already? Was that part of like the scoreboard work, or?
No, I basically built a site that they could use in their browser. And that was part of the idea. Was they know how to use a browser, and I can show them how to view the source of the pages. And that's really all I need to do.
Yeah.
And then if I make it valid enough XML or HTML, then they should be okay, and they were.
So I think this is what I think really strikes me, because I've had experience with you at other times, and it's the same. You basically said, well, they're not meeting me where I am. Let me meet them where they are, right? You said, well, I'll just go ahead. Well, fine. Do you know HTML? Yes. Okay, good. I'll do that. And I really love that. That's always been my experience with you. is I really love how you're like, well, what is their point of view? What is their position? Let me go there. And I love that idea. And I love that. And that some of that comes from John Moore's, he was using HTML as their internal API at Comcast at the time, right? So some of that's from there too.
Yeah.
Cool. Very
the
cool.
video really had my wheels turning. Like, yeah, this is not really like web scraping or screen scraping, but you're really building a real application here that people are using, and it works.
Yep. Cool.
So HTML can be an API, Mike?
Oh yeah, right. I mean, as Stephen's living proof. I mean, John talked about it for years, right? That's the video I think we're referring to. But Stephen's actually built one, right? I mean, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's official.
It's official. Mark it up.
I mean, I would say that approach is so true to API for me. Like what API is, I mean, people get hung up on the protocols and the JSON, XML, whatever, but an API is an offer, is an olive branch to like, hey, let's find common ground to like do this thing, poke through the firewall. So I'm going to come to you in a certain way. And I just don't think enough people see that. Some people are straight up like, I'm going to poke a hole and like invite you in. Like you got to come just play on my terms, or it's all or nothing. And I'm not going to support you. I'm not going to share anything with you. There's no real feedback loop that exists, but out of just a business need, you're like, we got to get this done. These people, I don't know how to like relate to these people, so I'm going to find the lowest common denominator to get it done.
Yeah,
I love it.
Yeah, I think the terms we use, like client and server and producer and consumer, sometimes obscure the fact that these are all just relationships and they're things that people are doing for each other. And like, that's pretty much the essence of it more than anything else.
We just got to learn to be more honest about that. I think about, how we're sharing those relationships, how we're speaking common languages, there's got to be a balance. And I think we've all seen examples over the years where there's not balance in some API ecosystems. And so, I mean, one sin that I would say you had in all this is you didn't create documentation. Like you didn't create documentation, but like, I totally am with you. Like in the moment, like you're just trying to get this done. Like you don't even know if they're going to read it or it's going to help. It's like, you're just trying to find the fastest way, the most intuitive way to get this done and get through to them.
A lot of the times I would output as much information as I could on the page. And so, I mean, I'm kind of a new developer anyway at this point. And so I'm not used to, it was just me as a developer on my side. I didn't really see people before doing documentation because it had just been me. So yeah, it definitely, but as the HTML kind of, as they view the pages, I would show like, here's a form, the form name is this. Whenever you call it, use this name of the form. And that's where you'll find the information.
Well, your story really, for me, like shows the importance of storytelling in the space, because you mentioned Mike's book, you mentioned John Moore's, and so like I've always been pushing on people to share their stories more, tell the story of what they're doing API wise, so that it's out there, someone else can learn from it. And I think that's why I feel like I know you so much, is because you've been a regular part of that. I would say both a publisher and a consumer of ideas, and you've gone down a few rabbit holes that in your journeys, you're a good rabbit holer. I would say I've found there's a couple times where you're like, I'm like, man, he went really deep on that topic. Like I never would have had time to go there. Thanks, man. Like it's like, so I really appreciate that about you.
It doesn't just stop with APIs like backpacks. I went down rabbit holes with backpacks and shoes. So it's just kind of for better, for worse, kind of what I do, I guess.
Fair enough. I mean, I'm with you. I do it on my own topics as well. So
yeah. We had another kind of cool part of that story was not long after we deployed the API and we had something working. we needed to do something else, or actually change how the software was working with the API. Specifically, this desktop software was configuring the scoreboards directly, so like a USB cable hooked up to the controller on the boards. And we needed to change up how he got some of the data. And what we did was we just put another form on the page, like, here's the next version of this that we're working on. And he gave me a new updated client. And so we worked in production together in tandem, where these two forms kind of sat side by side. The current software working used the old form, the new software used the new form. And then when we were ready to flip the switch, he just deployed the new desktop version to these systems, and it all just worked because everything was already there. So
so what you did is the message, like the API message, actually included both versions.
Yeah.
Right. Version 1, version 2, form 1, form 2, and that meant you were supporting both formats or both versions or whatever, whatever lingo you wanted to use at the same time. That's just such a great creative solution. You didn't even bother giving a new URL, right? It was like, no, just add another form. That's it. There's another form. That's it. I love it. I love it.
It's the same thing people do with like V2 and the path parameter, but you did it, I guess, by adding another node in the XML tree, like just in the same page. That's really cool.
Yeah.
I feel like we need to do like one of those like animated posts about this where you can scroll down and see the history of the evolution, because we talk about these things and it's so many concepts that come into it around URLs and deprecation and sunsetting, and really like the meat of it is what you just said. And can't we, like, that's why we do this stream, is to package up these like core ideas and ship them out in just the story form. And that's a really good example of like a really complicated topic that's just as simple as adding another node in your HTML page.
Yeah.
If I could be even more pedantic, I mean, if you knew more about all this, you'd never do this. Right? It's like, no, you're supposed to have a new version number or some other lingo, right? Whereas this just doesn't make sense. It's like, let's just be practical. I'm just going to put another form on this and we'll just keep moving. I just love it. Yeah, it's very cool.
Yeah, I was going to kind of say that because I don't know if it was me being smart to add another form. It was another easy thing to do.
I love it.
Now that you know what you know, are you as practical as you were back then in doing things? Do you still try to level the playing field like that? Or are you, I find I'm always thinking big picture strategy, and some of the folks I talk with are like down on the ground floor in their organizations. And I've got to tone down mine and go give them little bits of the future but they need practical. So do you struggle with that same thing?
I, not long after kind of getting into this world, I started to really dig into APIs because I was just really interested in the whole world and how this is working. And it was such a field where it was like very mature, but also lots of opportunity to think about things. And I don't think I think I got more dogmatic as I kind of got into things. And I don't think I got pragmatic until later on, after a couple failures. I remember one, I became a little too dogmatic about hypermedia, and I sold this to a team I was working with, and they got real excited about it. And then they said, okay, I got my open API, it was Swagger. I got this document. Now what do I do with it to make it work with hypermedia? And I'm having to kind of like explain around a lot of stuff. And I was almost just trying to pull them completely out of their world and do something else. And it just wasn't working. And that was, I think, one of the big kind of aha moments for me. Of course, there were many, but one of like, hey, you need to be a little more pragmatic about this approach rather than, trying to meet people where they are, basically.
Yeah. Those are the hard lessons, though. I think we all have them. I've been very dogmatic about certain approaches, and in my old age, I just can't go there as often as I used to.
I think the trend line looks very, very practical and scrappy. We learn a lot and we get a little more dogmatic, and then I'm drawing it wrong because of the reverse, but then we go back down to pragmatism again, if we learn more about sort of the limits of the dogma. But I see that curve a lot, and I think there's like different topics in all of our lives that we probably follow the same kind of pattern with.
But I really thoroughly enjoy the academic realm we've all created in the API space and API sector. And I would put everyone on this call in this kind of group of people who are super nerdy about it and kind of have this inflated self of purpose and contribution to it. But we do. I think we contribute a lot of good things, but like we get caught up in ourselves too, and I think such big picture. I did yesterday a 1 hour talk with Electro Federation Canada. So they are the electrical parts supply chain trade organization for Canada, and they got to modernize, and they're in their throes of their digital transformation as an industry, and APIs are important. And I just love those conversations, like eye-opening and letting me know that like my lofty beliefs about APIs don't really matter. Like it's really pragmatic, on the ground, hands-on things that are just going to make sense to them. It's not about me. So
Yeah, if Kim, when our paths crossed at API Strat, I actually gave a talk. My talk there was pragmatic hypermedia. Mm-hmm. So this was like me coming back around, kind of an apology, not really an apology, but and so this is like, I had some experiences where we did hypermedia in a more pragmatic way, and it worked, and it kind of met people where they were, and that was me kind of talking through some of that learning experience of that.
Yeah. So I want to bring out relevant kind of things. I've been stuck from Mike. I don't remember where you first said it, but your story this week about, you've always been a evangelist for the message, and yep. I'm definitely very like tripping over I'm doing a lot of work right now trying to align the async API, GraphQL, Open API, JSON schema from a specification standard body level, like getting them all harmonized and working together in a certain way moving forward. And so I'm tripping up on thinking about a lot of diverse protocols I have in here on a window on HTTP 3 and how it's almost ready, and I'm thinking through, and I'm wanting to figure out how do we build bridges to people so that they can see that the message is what matters, and that especially in the time right now with TCP, HTTP 1.1, 2, 3, and MQTT and all the devices, like how do we build bridges to where people are right now and then get them to a future that is decoupled from the protocols, from the transport, from all of that. So this is getting hardcore API, maybe not less storytelling, but I think Stephen, think goes down these rabbit holes, and I know you have, Mike. So on the topic of building bridges, how do we show people that? How do we get people to get their message house in order and doing that, and then not focusing on the endpoints and the protocols and whatnot? Any thoughts from any of you?
I'll just sort of reiterate a little bit of what Eric and I think you're referring to the thing Eric and I released this week, but also just some experience in general that is kind of storytelling. I learned decades and decades ago, before I was really a computer nerd, when I was a music nerd. I think some of us share some of these other sort of avenues in our lives. You learn by starting from a place and then going to a place you don't know. That's how you build. You start from where you know and you go to a place you don't. You drop somebody in the middle of a place they don't know, and they have a terrible time getting a handle on things. So just dropping them in the middle of JSON and HTTP, if I'm working on real-time operating systems and scoreboards, is really hard. But if you take me from a place I know, like HTML, then you get there. So my experience overall, I've usually been a person who I'm thinking about, what it would be like 5 or 10 years from now. often that's a very bizarre place. This is the way my brain works. I'm often imagining things that nobody's using, that nobody's doing. So explaining to people is super hard. So I usually try to find some way to sort of connect or sort of like get from A to B. And I've had varying degrees of success with that. So a lot of times it's a bit like what Stephen reminds me of when I hear Stephen's story, is like find out where somebody is and then start from there. So I'll just give a real simple story example of my own. For probably 7 years, 6, 7 years, Leonard Richardson and I have been talking about an abstract way to describe APIs. And it's never really gone very far. There's a small core of people who are very interested in it and do some very creative things with it, but it doesn't really reach very closely. So last year, a year ago, I did an experiment. I started talking about it from the standpoint of existing definition languages. So rather than talking about the idea that I have about abstracting commonalities, I said, let's start from Protobuf, let's start from GraphQL, let's start from OpenAPI, let's start from SOAP, and then talk about this format that Leonard and I and Mark Foster work on called ALPS, Profile Semantics. And it got a whole bunch more interest because I started from a place that somebody knows. So I think what happens, you're right in the middle of a place where a bunch of different places where people know. They know schema, they know GraphQL, they know async API, they know OpenAPI. So it may be this sort of act of getting people in the same room and getting them to talk about the same things and help them realize, oh, we are kind of talking about the same thing, but looking at the elephant in a different way. So I think my experience has been just what I think you already do very, very well, which is get people to talk to each other. And when people talk to each other, they figure out what their commonalities are. That's been my experience. I am very anxious and very excited to see the kind of discussions. What's the result of the kinds of discussions you are currently engendering, Ken?
Yeah,
because I think it's going to be very, very interesting.
I mean, I think the discussions at the sector, what do we operate in the API space, API sector, which is a slice across, I guess, many companies, but getting all of us together and talking and sharing stories is like one challenge. But then how do you do it within these enterprise organizations? Because I would say that's the biggest challenge is I can have the toolbox of answers, like all the right answers, in the toolbox, and then put it on the table of an enterprise, and people still aren't going to do them. They aren't going to, they're not going to use, and there are no right answers. So don't, there's
no,
I don't have this toolbox, but say I did, I can't do it. I mean, and so Stephen, do you have any other, I mean, we need to catch up on what you're doing these days. So I'm not totally in tune, but what are examples of you trying to reach people, educate people? What's, building bridges? What are you doing these days right now?
I guess to kind of go back with what you were talking about and thinking, one of the things that I spent some time reading about was the use of metaphors. I can't remember the person's name on Twitter, but they work at Khan Academy, I think, and did a bunch of metaphor work with graphics and pictures as a way to describe and share difficult topics with people. And they recommended some interesting books. One was The Metaphors We Live By. Basically, everything that we think about and talk about is through some form of metaphor. So like when we talk about time is money, basically, because we spend time is precious, we save time. And so we use this concept of time being money to kind of bridge this whole conversation. And someone has done this with organizations. I think it's called Images of Organizations, where they use metaphors to describe these organizations. Like a lot of organizations treat themselves as factories, and what does that play itself out to be? Some organizations treat themselves as organisms or culture, And you can see almost a shift with like moving away from the factory concept to more organism-based or culture-based concepts. And so I thought it was really interesting that how this person was using metaphors and how metaphors can be used to describe difficult technical concepts. And I started to think like, what are the metaphors that we use in computers? You know, we have metaphors like jobs and queues and workers, you know, like some person doing some work, and we turn that into a technical term. And I wonder in the API space, is there room for some good metaphors? I don't know of any off the top of my head, but you know, what could you use to describe APIs in a way that lets people talk about things that aren't technical? Like, you know, I've heard some people say like, you know, APIs are a language or a bridge, like a bridge, communication. So, you know, maybe there's some interesting ideas to like figure out what are interesting metaphors that would help bridge the discussion.
Is there a way that we can give someone a thesaurus, like a thesaurus ring, so they glow, like based upon what they know? They're, you know, what they're, you know, I'm in Excel spreadsheet. I live in email. I'm on social media. These are things that I know. So what are the metaphors that are going to work so that, and this is what I always loved about Alps, or as I'm thinking about Alps, is like you have an API a response, you know, a product or a book listing that I'm interested in. Like it's JSON, and then there's the database backend, the API, all of the things. But like, why can't it just be like, oh, I'm interested in that book listing, drag it over into my inbox and hit send, and it's sent as a book listing? And or why can't I drag that into my Excel spreadsheet and it just populates, you know, the columns? Those are the things I know. I used to play Civilization. You guys ever play the Civilization game? But in a ways, it's like you build the world and you get to know the world, and everything's like a brown spot until you get to know it, and then it's like green grass and there's like a castle there or whatever. And so you move around the world until you know and you've experienced all the tiles. But until then, you just have this kind of narrow. So it's like, how can we figure out what people know and what are those little digital bits that they care about, describe them, and then abstract away all the crap that we've accumulated as tech people over the years? And like, why can't we do that? Why can't you just drag things into, I mean, it seems like POP and SMTP is a perfectly good transport for these messages.
Yeah, that's very cool. You know, it's amazing, Stephen. I'm continually surprised when I talk to you. I learn something every day. So you've referenced Gareth Morgan's Images of Organization, which is a book that affected me 20 years ago in terms of thinking about how to interact with things. You've referenced Lakoff's Metaphors We Live By. George Lakoff also, you know, has completely been it's been a huge driver in the way I think about the ALP specification and semantics and ontologies and in describing things to people. I think this is another big part of storytelling, which is when we sort of share where the touch points are with each other, we sort of realize, oh, there are lots of things that we can connect with. And it almost becomes, I think, sort of like what you're saying, Kian, in the sense that if I could just drag over Gareth Morgan's Metaphors about Organizations and drop it on Lakoff's lessons about how metaphors drive the way we see the world, suddenly I get the format and the message and all these things that I want. I mean, I think sometimes we're just like super close to actually enabling all of these kinds of things, and that just really exciting. Like I'm already like jazzed so much today just from talking to Stephen like this. This is really great.
Yeah, one thing I feel like is at least an avenue to dig on is what these different teams and all these companies are doing for one another. Like at the end of the day, they're all part of a bigger story, and they're playing this music as one big symphony. And I think a lot of the time we kind of miss that. Like these are the people who are like asking us for stuff at 4 o'clock on a Friday that we don't want to answer it. But like, you know, if we set up these processes, if we do things in a way that are supportive of the other people around us, that's like building sort of this this team, this group of people that aren't necessarily people I work with every day, but like we're all moving in the same direction. So I think the thing I would be curious about with all the different specification formats is they all have solved different problems, but they have similar undertones, like how you manage optionals and how you manage polymorphism. And like, it'd be really interesting to see if we can get people to talk about the commonalities and maybe even solve problems for each other that aren't relevant to their format or how they solved it. But there's probably a lot, like there aren't many people in the world who think very, very deeply about how to structure a JSON schema. And the people who have that in their head are going to be able to help people who think about how to structure GraphQL queries, just because it's similar ontologies. And I think showing people that like they can help each other solve problems is a big part of it.
That's a really curious way to think about it. So it's almost like, strength through diversity, right? It's like there are lots of other ways to think about this. Let me access Stephen Mizell's way of thinking about this, and that can help me solve this particular problem, right? It's rather than let me level the playing field so that we're all doing the same thing. We should all be using format X, right? No, what you're really kind of saying is we should have a rich enough ecosystem that I know this is the time to apply a format Y. This is the time to apply metaphor Z, and so on and so forth, so that I can switch, right? Maybe this is a new use of the term code switching, right? We have to learn to speak in the right way depending on the audience in the room we're in, to make sure that we don't scare anybody off, to make sure that we don't miss the opportunity to actually make a connection.
You saying technical and business? Like, should everyone be able? Is this just a technical, making everyone feel welcome, or is this, business and end user too? Everybody.
I think it goes.
I would think everybody, right? It goes everywhere, right? But
because I mean, when you have these things that we very, I do care about a well-crafted open API definition. Very few other people I know care about that, and I constantly question my own existence. Why do I care about it? But I do. And in this moment, for this one specific purpose and reason that matters to me, but no one else does. But they want the outcomes of what one will do. And then honestly, like, I don't even think that outcome's where we should be at. There's like 5 or other steps in the future, but we still gotta connect with those, abstract away the complexities, but make them, I guess, so you can scratch at them. I mean, I want view source on everything, on every layer of it, so that I can quickly see behind it. But I feel like the training and learning people, back to Stephen's original story of, like, you weren't in the business of educating these folks or moving them forward. You just had one task to accomplish, right? So the cost of training them on HTTP, on the API space, on what JSON works, how request response, all of it, you didn't have time for that. You needed one thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that kind of drove, that was the business needs, I guess, were really pushing us. I wasn't trying to use any fancy technical, like the newest languages or the newest tools. I think I later kind of went that way, but we were just trying to solve a real business problem of improving the accuracy of data, and that kind of drove the solution the most, I think.
And so your feedback loop with the scoreboard, when you did the multiple forms, like, what was that? How did they send you changes to be able to, like, evolve the system? Like, what was that feedback loop look like?
It was just me and another developer, and a lot of it was over email. Us having some discussions here and there of, I need this data from your API. This is what I need. I don't know how to describe it to you. Here's a Word document of the stuff that I need. And then I'm building an HTML for him. Like, here's an HTML page with the stuff that you need. And so and then I would deploy it, and he would just start using it in his browser and trying it out and say, well, this doesn't work, or this doesn't make sense to me. What is this? And that was really kind of the way we collaborated.
So the feedback loop was probably in hours or days rather than weeks.
Mostly days. He was, I think he was West Coast, and so we would probably, and it was just me working on this one thing at the time, so I could usually turn it around to the next day for him.
Shifting gears, I want to get your view, Stephen, on RestFest. So can you describe for people who are watching this, what is RestFest in 30 seconds or less? I mean, you can take as long as you want.
Is the timer starts now? Okay. So RestFest is a place that you can go and just learn and talk about APIs and hear other people's experiences and get to know people around the space of just working in APIs. That's the way I kind of felt of it. And it was a conference, of course, unconference where everybody spoke, but it was so informal in such a way that it just felt like you were sitting around hearing people tell what they did or what they thought was interesting. So yeah, just kind of people getting together to chat.
How'd you first learn about it?
I think the first time I heard about it was that year after kind of building the API, and maybe Mike mentioned it to me. I don't remember, but it was kind of when I first got into this space. I heard it from somewhere, Twitter or Mike or someone, and I said, "Yeah, I'm going to go."
Do you have any thoughts? Like, so where are you living right now? Where are you located?
I live in Western Kentucky in a little town called Murray, which is, I always joke that it's the middle of nowhere, but it's also the middle of everywhere. So it's just a small college town.
Yeah, nice. So as the world kind of comes back, I have a motive here. I'm planning API specifications conference. I'm trying to figure out, what's going to happen API wise here in the next 6 months to a year. How are we going to get back together, sharing ideas? How we're going to kind of drive things into the next kind of momentum level, between the specifications. And I'm not sure everyone's going to want to come back together. So I'm trying to figure out, do you think RestFest has a place in the future as a format that's going to work? What do you have any thoughts on like API learning post-COVID reality? As far as for you personally, I'm not asking you to judge what the world's going to do, but for you, like, what do you want to see when it comes to learning about APIs and kind of the next wave of your development?
A good question. As far as RestFest, I love that format of the unconference, informal, formal kind of way of experiencing things, to where you kind of hear from people that may not always, or maybe not feel comfortable, or may not put in a call for a paper or a presentation. They kind of get into a spot where they feel comfortable to chat. And so I guess to kind of bring that into the discussion of storytelling, I like that more people, I guess, that maybe aren't telling stories, aren't talking about it, to be able to talk about it. Because I think a lot of the stuff that we hear in the world is very enterprise focused or very large company focused or big tech focused. And of course, not everyone's working in that world. Some people are, working in small companies, building little APIs, but still doing some really cool stuff that everyone could learn from, for sure.
Yeah. I think you're getting at what I'm thinking about is like, how do we make the space more accessible? But I would say how for this round, because I'm thinking in decade chunks, just to get you in context in my head, like the last decade of API storytelling has been very echo chamber. And I feel like the next decade of API storytelling has to be more inclusive, not just technical. And so we got to use our metaphors, and we got to abstract things down to things that are more accessible, meaningful to people, and they're going to want to come and talk about them. So, and RestFest for me and you described it well, I would say, as far as it's an inclusive place where everyone can come, and watching people show up thinking, they're not going to talk and then having to talk, or it always is, I think, super fascinating, like bringing people, because there's some people who ended up with some really interesting stories. You didn't know they were a storyteller, and then you kind of put them on the spot or made them feel comfortable, I guess, enough to want to come out. But I just don't know how this translates to the regular world of business and getting people out of their skin. I don't know. I guess thoughts, questions, on that. How do we get people into a RestFest like environment post COVID, I guess?
I think the real world non-recorded component of it is important. Like not having to think about the things that you share. Obviously, you want to make sure they're appropriate, but not having to think too much about like, oh, well, this sort of poorly formed half thought that I'm going to share with the group and get feedback on, going to end up on YouTube and it's there forever now. Like, so I think there is something that we lose from not being in person and not being in the same place. And I've seen so many examples of like open mics or like the Moth kind of things where you see someone in the corner and they're never going to go up, and then after like the fourth or fifth person goes, this person who you're like pegged doesn't never go up or goes up. So creating those kind of spaces where like the energy can build in the room. I know that's hard to imagine right now, but I think that's a really important part of it.
Yeah, I would volunteer also. A big ethos in RestFest was like the sort of the watchword has always been everybody talks and everybody listens, right? So a big part of this is this chance to listen to people I wouldn't normally see. Every year I went to RestFest, I would meet someone who I've never met, never heard of, never met. You talk about this sort of this echo chambery thing, right? Which I think I kind of agree. And they would always have an incredible insight to share. And I think that's one of the keys that RestFest tried to do. I will say also, RestFest has not had a good experience in scaling well, right? We've always hovered around something like 30 people, 35 people. I think one year we got up to 40 and it was almost uncomfortable. We were kind of rushing people around. And so that's a super challenge. So it turns out, at least in my experience, we could create a great, rich experience for a small group of people.
Yeah.
But we couldn't make that great, rich experience for a large group of people, which may actually be okay. But that means you need to do it in different ways. So there are a lot of things that, I think the RestFest pattern, the unconference pattern, which is RestFest pattern is just borrowed from a lot of other things, right? I think that was probably, Stephen, that was probably the first time you and I met face to face, probably, right? Yeah. Aiden, was that the first time you and I were in the same room? I think that's the first time I met Dev.
We met Dev, and then we were on the phone the very next day.
That's right. That's what it was. Dev was the one who came to RestFest, right?
Yeah.
But so, I mean, that's a super valuable thing. And I think that goes back to bridging, which you talked about before, Ken, as well. But it's been a learning experience. It's been a chastening experience at times. What I found surprising, maybe not, is that during the stay-at-home pandemic, we did not RestFest remotely. There didn't seem to be any energy. We sort of touched on it a little bit in Discord and a few other places, but nobody seemed to develop an energy to do that remotely. And I think it probably goes right to what Aiden was saying, which is the super powerful aspect of that event is not the podium. It's the not podium part. It's the sitting next to somebody. It's the chance to work on it. We had hacks every year. It's a chance to get together a team of people you've never met, and now you're on a team to hack up a solution. We would have social events. So I think there are other aspects to that story that may be challenging as well. And it's hard for me to have a good perspective because I've been involved in it for more than 10 years. But those are the lessons that kind of keep coming back to me. I've always met amazing people, and the most rewarding parts of it have almost always been off podium.
I think that really gets at the essence of what I was trying to get at is I'm trying to figure out what the formula is. And I don't think there's any right or perfect formula, but like what is needed in this next age. And I think the in-person, I think the weight, and Aiden put a emphasis on it that I think we need constant reminders to see is the weight of surveillance, like that we've all built into all of this. And I'm not
Yeah.
saying just like, you know, NSA, just like, hey, you know, what I said is going to be on YouTube. And I'm like, I'm very accustomed to having my face and things being online. I live a very public life, but until I don't, you know, until I'm like over it and like
Yeah.
I just want to like hang out with you guys and talk, and so I, you know, I think to get APIs to the next level, I think it's not just about doing APIs to the next level. It's how do we get everyone together and and being intentional about cross-pollinating of circles and understanding that maybe some people aren't going to go back to the traveling, you know, that some of us have done over the last decade. And we need to still make sure that the information, the knowledge, and people is still spread as wide as possible. Yeah, I don't know. I'll just
I think everyone who goes to ResFest needs to do their own ResFest. It needs to spread. But you have to bring it back.
Yes.
You have to bring it back to your group, your company, your location, wherever it is. Like, because it really is important. And then imagine all the things that this pod learns doing their own ResFests in their company or in their community, and then they bring it back to the other side. I think that facilitating, knowing how to facilitate an unconference is like a skill that we should teach at the unconference and encourage people to take with them.
That's actually brilliant. We've talked on and off about how scaling might mean creating a kit, you know, lowering the barrier of entry to doing one. But I think your characterization of that, you know, just as people show up and they're like, wait a minute, I have to talk, and then we're like, yeah, but that's the easy part. You have to do one of these when you get home, like, you know, it's just like you're gonna blow someone's mind. What? No, I'm running away. But I love the thought. Yes, I love the thought. That's a very interesting idea. Stephen, would you be up for doing a ResFest in Western Kentucky?
I would do it. Yeah.
See, Aiden may be onto something. This is good.
I would totally do one here too. I think we should talk about the branding a little bit, because like the first time I went, like I thought it was gonna be like Bonnaroo. I thought there'd be like bands, different stages, and like girls in skimpy. You know, no. I mean, ResFest. You know, I just had
it's couches, right? Just really comfy couches.
Yeah. No, I think the bring it home model. That's like that image in your head. Like when you sit down, you realize you have to talk. Like, no, you just subscribe to doing one at home too every year. Now I like that. So,
forever.
Well, I'm gonna keep mulling this over, because I'm actually really genuinely trying to recreate a lot of the magic, I would say 2012, 2016 of information sharing that I think, and acknowledge that it was venture fueled. There was a lot of venture capital fueling these conversations, but we're here again, and there's a lot of venture capital fueling the conversation. So I'm just trying to think out of the box when it comes to how do we spread the information and get people being more coordinated in how they work together across these specifications, across the tooling. But I think now that we live in a kind of diverse API toolbox world where REST or HTTP APIs are still dominant, I think we've got a lot of talking to do amongst each other to get on the same page. I'll just leave it there. So any other thoughts, Stephen? Anything you want to share with the world before we let you go today?
I don't think so.
No?
Nothing else off the top of my head.
Okay.
This has been fun, though.
Thank you for coming. Thanks for sharing your scoreboard story. And hey, real quick, do you dabble in IoT other devices these days, or do you device API guy? No, I'm not either.
No.
So
No.
anyways, well, thanks for being with us, and it's already online on YouTube. I'll send you a link. We'll add some context and some social media love to it, and then we'll kind of keep spreading the word. Thanks for being with us.
Great. Thanks again for having me, for inviting me.
All righty.
See ya.
Bye.
Yep.
See you.
Yep.
All right, you guys. Any last words, you two?
I'm looking for places to get best year. I'm already thinking about it.
Really?
Yeah, like going through like, oh, this place. I got some ideas.
All right. I love the sound of this. I love this. It's been great. I had a great time today, as usual. Thanks.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna let you go first, Mike, and then I'm gonna let you go, Aiden. But I want to plug Aiden and I right after this. We'll be talking StoryCore, API StoryCore, which is we'll get to the meat of what we've been mentioning several times throughout this conversation about what Aiden does for a living. I think he works for the CIA or something. I don't know, but anyways, it's
Right.
something to do with StoryCore.
Won't want to miss it.
Don't want to miss this. All right.
All right.
See you, Mike.
Have a good
See you,
weekend, Mike.
gentlemen. See ya.
All right. Bye, Mike. There we go. There's the button. All right. Let me close this one down. I'll send you a new link in Slack and we'll talk.
Sounds good. See you, Ken.
All right. Bye.